Piski replied by sending him the testicles of a boar. Now outraged, Ibrahim wrote back, "Perhaps you thought I left for Constantinople because I was scared of you. You were, you are, and you are going to be a godless son of a bitch." This was going to be a fight to the death with unlimited choice of weapons. Late in the winter of 1589, a group of young soldiers dismounted their horses and crept through the darkness toward the gates of an enemy fortress. They scraped and scratched in the frozen earth and dug a small hole where they planted a lance, and from it they hung a letter and a present. Normally, gifts like this were small, say a heron feather or a fine handkerchief, something that a poor soldier on the borderlands could afford to give away. And the letters usually went as follows: "Whoever takes this token of esteem should be prepared to duel with so and so at fort such and such at a certain time." Of course, general challenges like this were always accepted because the honor of the entire garrison was at stake. And these were generally low stakes duels, jousts using training lances, which usually ended as soon as either rider were unhorsed. But occasionally the stakes were raised much higher. Celebrated fighters on either side might seek out to fight a worthy opponent and challenge them by name alongside a gift of much greater value. For example, it might be a purebred horse, or a decorated set of leather harnesses, or even a bejeweled drinking cup. Such was the case with this particular challenge, in which Istvan Piski of Tihany, located today on the shores of the Great Lake Balaton in southern Hungary, challenged Ibrahim Agha of the Ottoman fortress of Endrod in 1589. Now, if you're at all familiar with European medieval history, this concept, the knightly joust with lances, would be something very familiar. Professional warriors would test their mettle against each other for honor and glory, or at least their reputation among other professional warriors. And it was the same far to the south and east, in the broad, undefined inter-imperial borderlands between the Habsburg and Ottoman empires, in what's today southern Hungary. We don't know much about these two men. Evidently, they were both high-status warriors on either side. And it's clear from their names that Istvan Piski was a Hungarian Christian, and Ibrahim Agha was a Muslim. But what stands out in this case are the unique conditions of the challenge. Piski challenged Ibrahim to a duel on the frozen ice of Lake Balaton. Basically, as a general context to all of this, by this point, the Ottoman-Habsburg wars had stabilized in southern Hungary, right on the shores of this lake. The Ottomans had built a stockade fort in a place called Kopani, facing right across from the Habsburg-Hungarian fortress of Tihany. I actually visited there when I was a student. Tihany is now most noted for its production of lavender. It's a very beautiful place. And Balaton itself is jokingly referred to as the Sea of the Hungarians because they are cut off from the Mediterranean. But during the exceptionally cold winters of the Little Ice Age, this lake would freeze, and soldiers could ride directly across and apparently joust on the ice. By the way, this is a particularly topical topic because this winter has been unseasonably, unusually cold, and for the first time in many years, Lake Balaton has frozen again. This story was discovered by the historian Gustav Bayerle, and he emphasizes both the illicit nature of these duels, but also their inevitability in the martial culture of the era. After the Ottoman conquest of the medieval Hungarian kingdom, the Ottoman war machine more or less ground to a halt. Large-scale campaigns of conquest became prohibitively expensive, and so the conflict between the Ottomans and their rivals devolved into small-scale border clashes. This was the Kleinkrieg, or Little War, led by ambitious local warlords rather than governors and generals. And in fact, the administrators in Ottoman Buda and Habsburg Vienna actively tried to suppress these raids as they harmed trade and taxation. Duels were banned altogether in the Treaty of Edirne in 1568. At the same time, The martial honor culture, which inhabited this inter-imperial space, made abandoning the duel impossible. The Ghazi warriors who rode out of Anatolia over 100 years earlier to conquer the Balkans, and who divided up the best of these lands among themselves, led by their status and reputation. The poor, young, and ambitious soldiers who followed their lead in the many years after had no other option. Much the same could be said of the now dislanded and impoverished Hungarian gentry. So honor became everything, and in fact, a uniting force in a region divided by religion and empire. Apparently, this wasn't the case for Ibrahim Agha, however. He delayed in the preliminary negotiations before the duel until the ice on the lake had already melted. And Piski replied by sending him the testicles of a boar, which is obviously a terrible offense in Islam. And he wrote to Ibrahim that Ibrahim's gift of a horse must have been given because Ibrahim didn't have enough barley to feed the animal. Now outraged, Ibrahim wrote back and he raised the stakes. So instead of a joust, this was going to be a fight to the death with unlimited choice of weapons. He wrote, "Be this letter given to the hands of that dishonest, imbecile, perfidious, and depraved son of a Istvan Piski and Tihani. You ungodly infidel, depraved and wicked son of a vagrant dog. You son of a you were, you are, and you are going to be a godless son of a Perhaps you thought I left for Constantinople because I was scared of you. I have sold my Agha post, and even if I have to request permission to duel, I trust God that nothing will be done to prevent it. So let us duel, you depraved, godless, and wicked son of a bitch." Honestly, it goes on like that for several pages. I've edited it down because it's so repetitive. The Hungarian scribe who was called in to write all this down evidently must have been frantically scribbling to keep up with this tirade. And funnily enough, Ibrahim ends this by claiming that the horse that he sent as a return gift wasn't a gift at all, and in fact, it was just the payment on a ransom due to another man. Evidently, this was an insult. And then he ends this by signing off as your non-friend Ibrahim. Talk about a lame reply. Like you're about to fight to the death in a god-awful imperial backwater. The least you can do is write a sick burn to be remembered by. Anyway, it's unknown if this duel actually took place. I have a hard time imagining it didn't, although it would have by this point happened on the marshy banks of the lake rather than the ice, obviously. They would have rode out on horseback, surrounded by their friends and lackeys, wearing their finest armor and weapons. Judging by contemporary art, Piski probably would have been more heavily armored in plate, and likely carried one of these wing-style shields designed to protect the neck. Ibrahim could have been wearing lighter chain and lamellar armor, with the turban over his helmet, and probably a lighter, round, woven shield. They both might have adorned themselves with animal skins, exotic feathers, and esoteric good luck charms. At the appointed time, they would have charged each other with lances on horseback, before finishing with axes and sabers. The onlookers would have cheered, but it would have been over quite quickly. A short, bloody end to one life, and a triumphant feather in the cap of another. What they didn't know, though, and what we can see in hindsight, is this duel would have been the end of an era. Just a few years later, the fragile peace between the Ottomans and the Habsburgs broke down again, and the culture of illicit duels came to an end. They were replaced by the devastating and inconclusive battles of the long Turkish War. So, what are some takeaways from this story? First, despite the obvious civilizational and religious overtones to this conflict, these letters actually show that the soldiers on both sides shared a lot. They shared a martial culture and a sense of honor. And this sense of honor actually worked to arbitrate conflict and minimize actual danger. So, despite theoretically being mortal rivals, in 1578, the Hussars of Eger challenged the Ottoman garrison of Hatvan, saying, "Let us visit each other and joust. Let us have a good time for the sake of good neighborly relations." But I think there's another aspect to this. which is that we see in these stories rituals of medieval jousting being adopted by Ottoman warriors. And that's really interesting because charging directly into an enemy's lance is a very foreign way of fighting from these men's Turkoman horse archer origins. It requires both a whole different kind of protective armor, but also a different mentality and style of riding. We cultural historians usually tend to focus on exchanges, cultural exchanges passing from the East to the West. So, for example, fighting with the saber and wearing the mustache. But this is a pretty clear case of Western cultural rituals passing to the East. And I think that's pretty fucking cool. So if you like this, please give me a like and subscribe. I'm going to be working on, I think, a whole set of stories of the Ottoman Borderlands in the months to come, years to come. So I hope to see you then.